I have a scenario. I'm not. I was fortunate. I'm not going to mention the TV station, but I worked inside of one of the stations here in Boston for a very long time, and I see a lot of glamour goes on in the media, which unfortunately doesn't affect me in any way because I've been exposed to a lot of different jobs and places and things and people. So I don't see all the glamour, but one of the things that I always wondered about, on the panel you will always see non-African Americans, whatever ethnic group you want it to be, not on the panel. It just doesn't happen. But there were always people who wanted to be outside on the road doing the media, which I could never understand because I think in my mind the cold weather, the storms, the rain, and all of that type of stuff, is that just another level of the job getting to be on the panel?
What are you talking about, on the anchor desk?
Mm-hmm.
Not minorities, but out in the field, doing the reporting?
Yeah.
You see all the minorities out there?
Yes, exactly.
We've all reported for years before we got our anchor jobs, or I think started, half anchoring and half reporting or something.
Mm-hmm.
So your question
but the job never, it never, whoever's in that place never deplete out of that job, so that job is not available. I saw that happen for years.
Well, I think we're going to move on to another question, but I think that your point is well taken in that, of course, there's really not as many people in the, of diversity, minorities, as we would like to see in newsrooms in front of or behind the camera. And let's face it, some of it is because of socioeconomic factors. Some of it, some people cannot afford to take that $17,000 a year job when their first TV job out of college that they just spent $150,000 on their education or whatever it is these days. Some people can't afford that, and that's what it takes to get into TV. So, but in that being said, there are definitely ways to kind of crack that, but we have to think about those, and maybe that's a good place to start. I mean, Francis, do you have any suggestions for that, as opposed to perhaps people that are in that are minorities that don't really know whether or not they can afford.
You mean to start when you were starting and wanting to break in? Is that?
Oh no, I would never want to be a reporter, never ever. I just was
why
in
do those people stay?
I was in the environment, and I moved from one environment to another. And just me sitting there looking at it, I could see that, and I'm like, wow, I find it very phenomenal.
Like there wasn't any movement in promotions. It's also because people, reporter positions or any on-air positions are always coveted spots, because the moment you leave, you have 5 or 10 people at the very least who are already lined up that'll take that job, work for less for that job. So at that point, when Latoya and Francesca worked years from their small little market to their medium-sized market to their bigger markets, when you get to that bigger market, especially if it's a destination market where it's home, you are going to hang on to that seat until they, what I call Randy Price you, and kick you out. Right. So you stay as long as you possibly can. And a lot of times the way I put it is, when you have this job, you sign on the dotted line their contracts. We all have expiration dates stamped on us. You can be yanked off the store shelves before your sell-by date is up. Right. That's how I put it. Any moment they can go, you know what, you're not up for another 3 or 4 years. We're not feeling it. Yank you off. And you're replaced by somebody else. So it's just very difficult in movement. People stay there. And a lot of times in this environment and in this industry, in this economy, when people get expensive, when experience equals dollars, it's easier to say, okay, see you later. Let's hire somebody from Tampa or Green Bay, Wisconsin, pay you, a third of that, and you're filling that airtime too. And you're standing, in Revere Beach doing the story about the kids liquoring it up and leaving their beer bottles around. So that kind of goes with it.
The scenario is inspiring me to go on and do better for myself.
Yeah. I think we're going to move on to another question, but thank you for your thoughts. We can have more questions afterwards. One of the other things I wanted to ask about is, is there enough diversity coverage, and is it appropriate? Is it, for example, economic, racial? Is it all gangs and crime, for example? Is it, or is it all features and fluffy, dance festivals details of the, particular ethnic group that we're talking about on a Saturday or Sunday. And how do you get around doing stuff when, perhaps you need a translator, or do you just still sort of do stories that, perhaps you think are important and valid, but, are a little bit outside of whatever you would normally do, like just the Celtics winning or something, which is great, but...
Well, again, you're right. As far as like just covering minorities in our newscast.
Yeah, like how do you integrate it into features that perhaps deal with not just the Huxtables, but you know what I mean, like something that is like okay, you know what
just
I mean?
Generic,
There's
right.
only so many, African American flute players in the symphony. You know what I mean?
Right.
There aren't any.
Right.
Really,
Right.
but it's a great feature if you can come up with that. But how do you somehow generate ideas and stories that are good or decent or more well-rounded, and also perhaps stay away from some of the ones that perhaps create stereotypes?
Right. That's a good question. I think, and I'm not just going to talk about NECN. I'll talk about like just the span of I'm trying to think, is it 4 or 5 stations that I've worked for since graduating college? It really, I think, depends on your management and your news philosophy. Some managers, when I worked at the Fox affiliate, let's just start my first job out in upstate New York, they had me out there shooting. Fox was new then, newer. It was 12 years ago, and they wanted to be sexy, so they had me out shooting boobs one time at the mall. Like they were doing a breast story, and I had to go and get video of women with big breasts, and hey, I'm out of college. I don't like looking at another woman's chest. I don't want you to think that. So it really was up to the managers to decide sort of what I do. But I think as you get older, you get find your voice, I think, a bit more, and get a little bit more confident, or a little bit more strength. You can sort of interject things. I have to say, at NECN, I don't know. At NECN, all of our managers are white males. I don't know what their political leanings are, but I think that they have, they try, kind of say, or they're open to telling a story that is not just about, either Shaquan being shot on the street corner, or, the first black, you don't want to always have to be that. They will tell a story about a business owner who happens to be, black, and they'll tell that economic story. I do think that they could do it more. And I guess that's up to me, you know what I mean?
Do you go out and find, sometimes, I remember when I was at Fox here in Boston, frankly, I'll say it, but, they were like, we don't want you to interview, they call it MOS, man on the street, no more ugly people. We don't want, like, the toothless person. We don't want the person with one eye. You know what I mean? We want you to get MOS, man on the street, point of, from people that are cute. So, and I was like, okay. I'm like, that's an interesting way of filtering it. I guess that, if you're cute and you happen to be living on $10,000 a year, then that works if we're doing a story about poverty. But what if you're not? Right. Does that mean you don't do the story about poverty? So my question then, too, is, how do you find the right source? It's easy. We're always on deadline and things like that. Mm-hmm. How do you get the right sources and people in your stories that perhaps represent different perspectives when you are given the opportunity to just kind of do man on the street?
It's tough. There was an incident when the whole Rihanna-Chris Brown thing blew up. And we were all going to talk about it. I think what happened, I forget what it was, but there was a development where we needed to get the MOS man on the street. Well, it just so happened that the reporter had to break away to a bigger breaking news story. They brought the tape back, but all the interviews that they did happened to be all black women or men. So my manager saw that and they said, we can't use this. It's just, it's not a black story here.
Right.
This is not Chris and Rihanna. So they held it, and then the next day they just made sure that they had a better sampling. And it's tough because when we do these stories in a minute, right, and we interview 3 or 4 people, those 3 or 4 people don't even speak to all of your opinions, and it's tough to be able to find that balance and that representative of what they may think or what the public might think when you're only interviewing 3 or 4 people and you're only using 10 seconds of what each person has to say. So that's kind of the job, mm-hmm, the balance of trying to get the fairness out of there and to cover as much as possible that realm without being one-sided.
Yeah. No, I think that's fair. It's a challenge that we all face.